the Lake Geneva shoreline, make records with the mobile. We didn't have much time. Frank Zappa and the mothers were at the best place around. But some stupid with a flag on burned the place to the ground. Smoke on the water, a fire in the sky. Smoke on the water. Gambling house, he died with an awful sound. Funky club was running in and out, pulling kids out of crowd. When it all was over, we had to find another place. Swiss time was running out, it seemed that we would lose the race. On the water, a fire in the sky. Smoke on the water.
Good old Senior Coconut. Hello, R users. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, about 11-year user of R, but for the last 8 or 9 years, I've also been crafting entire narratives and projects within the same environment that I specify in my R analyses. And so every week, I get together with some compadres and compatriots and collaborators on these sorts of projects that occasionally stop by. And we're here to promote this way of structuring things. So this is sometimes referred to as literate programming. I've been calling it single platform project execution because in my field of psychology, literate programming is not something that really resonates with anybody. Anyway, we're here because we think that this is the way that if you're touching quantitative stuff, if you're at all related to or tangential or working within this broad kind of undefined area called data science, this multidisciplinary area called data science, that this is the way that you should be structuring your projects. And I really feel strongly about that. So it's kind of, I don't know, it feels a little preachy, I guess, to be saying you should be doing this, but really there's no reason not to be doing this because the capabilities that we have and the tools that we have right now just make this so accessible. And so I'm hoping that this becomes something that's more standard and expected instead of unusual from people in my field in particular, but anyone out there who's doing R analyses or Python analyses, this is a very fun and actually kind of rewarding way to structure your work. It minimizes error or the consequences of error. You can go back and correct that error really easily. You have shells that you can take and repurpose for future projects and future similar kinds of things that you're trying to produce. So these weekly slides are a good example of that. And maybe if you've followed me for a while in these weekly sessions, you're getting bored with these slides if you're using them because there's not a lot of difference on them in terms of their structure. So if you are using the slides and you say, Gulas, I'd like to have something a little more creative or interesting here, drop me a note and I'll change them. It's easy. It's easy to leave them kind of how they are in terms of structure, and I just swap out content. So we're here every week just promoting these literate programming principles and this way of structuring your work that's consistent with this idea of reproducible research. And really my interest here is just minimizing error. And I think this is the way that work can be structured if you're working with data, such that the consequences of error when you make it are going to be minimized. Now, one thing, before we get started tonight, so StreamYard, the software that I use to do these weekly live streams, it keeps adding features. And so I can tell that part of the StreamYard client base is not Gen X, because I'm feeling my Gen X-ness more and more every day. But part of my Gen X-ness is it works. Can I just have what works, please? Just no more features. I can figure out a way around what I need to do and what I want to do, but just give me the bare bones what works. And so one of the features that they added was just last week was something with mobile phones or mobile devices or just phones that you're viewing this. So the consequence of that is what you're seeing here is duplicated. It was duplicated last week. It's going to be duplicated this week, and I'm hoping to avoid it being duplicated next week. So I'm going to try to shut that feature off next week. But if you happen across this, and I'm just a little tiny pin prick on your device there, if I'm just a little small pixel, there is a different stream that's going on, and I'll try to. I know most people that watch this don't watch this live, but they seem to prefer to watch this after the fact. And so in the description of the video, for especially that little pinprick phone video, I'll put a link to this regular one as well. What I'm seeing is just fully laid out. And that might be convenient for some people, but the way that these weekly sessions are intended, so I'm kind of showing how to code, and we're live coding, and I don't see how that's going to be all that effective or useful or interesting for anyone who stumbles across that. So I'm going to try to disable that, but you'll see this duplicate. This week's live stream is duplicated, and that's what's going on with that. Is one is intended for desktop and one's intended for handheld devices. So we're here every week. We've done 103 of these sessions, probably more actually, if you count some other non-live stream things that we've done. But we're really promoting this way of structuring work, and we want to be here. The reason we're doing this every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern for roughly an hour is we want to be a resource if there's anyone out there who's interested in doing this and you just have questions about it, or you just maybe feel like there's a community of people doing this. We're here for that. I know even as someone that uses these uses these products and procedures quite often, there can be a level of intimidation with it. Because it seems like the people that are using it a lot, contributing a lot, producing a lot, maybe they have a skill level or knowledge level that seems like it's inaccessible. And really what I want to do is I want to kind of bridge that gap and let it be known that this is accessible with very little knowledge or skill. All you need is interest and a little persistence, and I'm here to help with that as well. I'm not perfect either. I'm not one of these high-level contributors. I'm just a consumer of these products, and I'm learning as I go. So we're here for that. And if anyone has any questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll try to answer them. If you get to this after the fact and you want to leave a comment, I can address a comment at that point as well. So in the absence of those sorts of questions, what we've been doing is we've been taking just a little capability of these platforms that we're using to help us craft documents, and we've been focused on that single capability 1 week at a time. And tonight we're going to take a look at document layouts. But before we take a look at document layouts and before we get to our normal transition here, I did stumble across, oh, by the way, this week's slides and every week's slides are available in the comments. If you come across this too soon and the comments aren't populated, look in the description of the video and there'll be a link to the slides in the description of the video. I'm hoping that people use the slides. I haven't had much feedback on that, but I have a fun time putting them together, and there's lots of hidden resources in them. So hopefully people are aware that those are a resource. But I did come across this week. I don't even know what I was looking for, but I came across a really neat product that I feel kind of bad that I didn't realize was out there. And there is a book that this person, Nicholas, has put together that's focused on a lot of what we're talking about every week, and it's called Quarto for Scientists. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but Nicholas uses, it seems like he's using the same basic toolkit that we've been using on these weekly sessions, and that is RStudio, R, and Quarto. And those are kind of the IDE is RStudio, the language is R, and then the software that permits and really makes easy to produce these publication ready documents, slides, and reports and books and websites. That software platform is called Quarto. And so I haven't gone through this entire resource, but I've gone through a little bit of it, and he has some downloadable files to help support this. It's really well constructed from a, I hate this word, but pedagogical perspective. So just kind of some of the learning principles that he's incorporated, and I believe there's other people working on this as well. Anyway, I wanted to share it as a resource because it was something that I was not aware of. I just stumbled across this week. And everything I've seen of it is really consistent with the philosophy of these weekly sessions. And I'm hoping to actually dig into it a little more deeply. And I have to because I'm also putting together a resource with the intent of that being something like a traditional 15-week graduate level university course. And I want to make sure that what I'm doing is not redundant with everything that he has. I can see just from the table of contents that it certainly isn't, but I want to see what's there, just in case that's something that I need to reference when I'm creating my reference as well. So that's really neat, and check that out. Bookmark that. I'm going to bookmark it, and I'm going to be checking that out more deeply, I guess, or with a little with a little more attention within the next week or so here, as long as I have time to do that. I've been reading so many literate programming kind of source material things that'll be a nice change of pace for me. All right. So because every week we take a look at these topics in an unscripted, exploratory way, what I try to do at the beginning of each session is to recap what we found and what we learned the previous week. And hopefully that is presented in a way that's a little more consistent with some of these pedagogical, I hate that word so much, principles in terms of being a little more, not, I don't want to say tutorial because that's the wrong word, but in a format that's a little more consumable in terms of learning about these topics. All right, so let's get into our transition here.
Last time, you remember, our heroes were creeping up on a strange-looking spaceship when they came upon the leader of those monstrous mechanical mice.
Bullwinkle, a big cheese!
I wish you wouldn't say those things so close together.
Coward that he was, the big cheese turned and ran with our heroes right after him. It was then that a strange-looking weapon emerged from the spaceship, aimed and fired.
They got me, Rock!
No, Bullwinkle!
They got you?
No!
Him?
Him!
Sure enough, it appeared that the big cheese had been stopped cold by the mysterious ray.
He makes a nice-looking statue, don't he?
Yeah, sort of a V-mouse to Milo.
Hey, Bullwinkle, he's been scrooched!
Been what?
Scrooched!
Oh, fiddle faddle, Rock. Only moon men can scrooge people.
Sure, and just where do we find moon men?
On the moon.
Or?
Or in spaceships, or... Yeah, funny how that works out.
V-Mouse to Milo. I always hear these differently when I'm wearing these headphones, so I appreciate them more. Last week, again, we've been going through the topics that we've been choosing are somewhat arbitrary, but we're following this convention of just following the sequence of the alphabet, our English alphabet. And so last week was the letter K, and so we talked about cables last week. Cables in the form of a cable is an early option in terms of producing tables within these documents that we make. So Kable works for PDF documents, it works for HTML documents, and those are the two, and we're going to see this again tonight, those are the two main kind of document types that we want to make sure that what we're doing is going to work for. Now there's a third document type, which is kind of Microsoft products, PowerPoint, and .doc files or normal Word documents. Those are not something that we've focused on these weekly sessions. If someone's interested in that, drop me a note. We can. Absent that, I'm not going to. I'm not a, because I love these principles so much. I'm not a huge Microsoft user. I don't really have much need for that at this point, other than to kind of, it's so pervasive that people will send you stuff. They'll send you Microsoft products. So Google's been helpful for that. If someone sends me a Word document, I usually put it into a Google Doc. So last week we were talking about cables, and the cable function has a little confusion built into it because originally it was intended to be this minimalist kind of procedure to produce these tables that can be used in documents, and the document types can be multiple document types. And so again, the primary transportability issue that we're concerned with here is PDF documents as well as HTML documents. And Kable, the original Kable from the knitter package, the original Kable specification is fantastic because it works equally well in PDFs as well as HTML files. And so what you're seeing here on the left in the R chunk is you're seeing a label that we're giving to the output of this chunk such that we can reference it later and cross-reference it. You're seeing a caption, so empty cars vars trunk, and then that's completely reproduced here. And then output location, that's used in these Reveal.js slides, and that says whatever is being processed here, give me the output of that adjacent to the code. And so it's something that I typically do use on these slides, and I'm just kind of trying to be transparent in terms of how we get that on the right, how we get that to be rendered. The commands for it are just Kable, and so it does come from the knitter package. The knitter package is something that has a lot of functions in it, but and it has a lot of capability and importance just for creating these documents, combining code and narrative. So knitter is the traditional engine that has enabled our ability to use narrative, markdown, as well as analytical code together in the same document. So knitter literally knits those two components together. But the Kable function is an old one. It comes from 2012, 2013 kind of era, and it was created by vi-vii, this remarkable, prolific contributor to all this markdown stuff, all of this literate programming stuff prior to Quarto. And so I just left one parameter in here. These are sometimes called arguments or parameters, but the parameter that I left in here was call.names because I find it very useful. And so there was no need to really specify MPG, SIL, and DISP displacement, but I wanted to leave those in just to let people know that this is a great way to amend the way your table looks without changing the data object itself. And so that's important as we're creating these literate programming documents where we have early stuff happening to data early in the document, and then we have maybe some more transformations and analyses, and then we have more transformations and analyses. And so doing something like changing the name of elements within your data objects, you may not want to do that. And so this is a great way around it. I can actually leave everything alone, but just ask for it to be rendered differently within the table itself. And there's all kinds of workarounds that people have for this, and I've done this myself, probably a little guilty of this, is you can also just make a duplicate object just for the purpose of this, but that clutters your environment, and that's not very efficient. So having call names within the function itself, I just love it. It's fantastic. I love it so much. Now, Kable was intended to be minimalist. It's not supposed to have a lot of what I call goop or a lot of formatting on it. Kable Extra is a package, and Kable Extra has a similar function to Kable built into it. It's called KBL, and this is where some of the confusion, I think, stems from in terms of online resources and help and documentation for cables, because a lot of the resources that you'll see if you do an internet search for how do I create a cable, it'll not do a good job of identifying whether the recommendations are coming from the original cable specification within the knitter package, or whether it's coming from Kable Extra, which is this kind of added on. It's intended as an add-on to Kable. And so the philosophy of Kable Extra is they wanted to be able to pipe cables. And so piping, of course, is this percent arrow percent operator. It's called a pipe. It was very popular. It was first introduced with the package Magritter, I believe. Now it's folded into the tidyverse, and it's a very popular way to structure kind of specifications within your scripts. And so Kable Extra says, hey, I know cables are intended to be not very fancy, but let's make them pipeable. So let's actually take a base table, which is what's happening here on lines 8 and 9, and let's goopify it a little bit. Let's add a little complexity to it. And that complexity is happening here on lines 10 through 13. What's my comment? Souped up knitter cable intended to, yeah. So the KBL command itself, there's a lot of redundancy with KBL and the knitter cable. These, for the most part, can be considered to be the same essential function. My understanding is the Kable Extra KBL actually does take knitter cable, and then it just does a little amendment to it, so it's based on knitter cable. If you're going to goopify your cable at all, the recommendation is to go ahead and specify KBL instead of cable, but again, it shouldn't matter all that much. My YAML specification here in the code chunk is the same structure, label, table cap, and output location as we had in the knitter cable. The only real difference here is the making it look fancy. And I make it look fancy. I just chose a few options. There's all kinds of things you can do with Kable Extra. The primary thing I did with the one on the right is I added a row above. This is very helpful for organizing things in terms of your tables. And the way that that's actually done is here on lines 12 and 13. So add header above. You can add a header above. I believe you can add a header below. It's still called a header, I believe. The actual the structure of that is a little funny. So you need to add up to all of the columns if we're doing this. So 1 plus 3 equals 4, and there's 4 columns on this table. You can have a blank column specified in terms of the content. So what I'm telling it here is leave the first column blank, but then span the next 3, and that's what's happening here with 3 vars. The other things I did was I made a cable classic, and that's giving it these kind of accentuated black lines here on the top and the bottom and the middle. So the horizontal lines, that comes from a styling called Cable Classic. There's different stylings that you can apply. And then one of the neat things about Kable Extra is you can isolate rows, columns, or even cells. And so I just isolated one of the rows here, and this it doesn't count the header row or rows here. I guess I have 2 header rows, but it starts the row identification at 1 right here. So this is row 1. This is row 2, and in row 2 I said just change the background color, and so we used our standard badass that we use on these weekly sessions because I think it's a funny name for a color. The only reason that I subsetted 29 through 31 here was to give a little differentiation on one of these variables, on the qualitative variable here that looks like factor levels. So VC and OJ, I just wanted a little differentiation, and the way that this particular data object comes is the first 30 values, the first 30 rows are all VC. And so that's why I chose 29 through 31. So those are cables. Cables are fantastic. They're very flexible. They're very powerful. And if you want to make it look a little more, if you want to control how it looks, you can also use that cable extra package. Now there's all kinds of different ways to specify tables using these processes that we talk about every week. Kable is just kind of an old school one. So cable's been around, other than pure markdown, cable's been around the longest in terms of specifying tables. So it was fun to revisit. I haven't used cable much recently. I kind of found a couple of new packages that I prefer, but sometimes as I hover over my water here. But it's good to have other options in your toolkit, because one of the things that does happen using these processes is you're going to encounter what looks like catastrophic error more frequently than you are if you're doing something like writing a document in Microsoft Word. Now, they're never catastrophic. They're always surmountable. But you're more likely to run into a scenario where you have to get creative with a solution. And so in those contexts, it's really important to have a couple of options in terms of how you solve the issue. So for example, I'll give you a concrete example. I've had papers where correlation tables have been just too big for a page. And you're going to want either to break that up over multiple pages, or you're going to want to shrink it. There are different ways that you can overcome something like that, and it's nice having different packages that give you different routes to the same solution. You're just trying to get the table to render nicely so it looks good. And there's different ways of course, there's just like everything with R, there's multiple ways to accomplish that. So tonight we're going to look at layouts, and there's all kinds of things we could look at with layouts and the document layouts, and this is where content goes within your document. What I thought we would do tonight is, originally I thought we would talk about images and controlling the placement of images. One of the things that has been challenging for me, even in HTML documents, and I say that because HTML documents tend to be more forgiving than other document types in terms of giving you something. But one of the challenges I've had is having floating images that have text wrapped around them, and so I don't think we're going to get to that tonight. But certainly, if someone and I have solutions for it, of course. But if that's a topic that someone is interested in, we can certainly cover that not tonight, but on a subsequent session. So absent images and floating images, what I thought we would take a look at is primarily just where the content is placed. And there are a few different kind of areas of focus here. And so and we're using a specification that comes from the HTML document tradition, but it's fine. We could actually use these terms with PDFs as well. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a look at layouts and see how portable the syntax is for controlling layouts across different product types. And definitely what we're going to look at is we're going to look at HTML product types, we'll look at typist product types, and we'll look at PDF product types. And those are the three that tend to give you the most feedback in terms of, yeah, I like this one, but I'm not going to be cooperative with these other ones. And again, HTML tends to be the most forgiving, just the way that the software that we're using, Quarto, is structured. And PDF tends to be the most picky or finicky, with typist kind of straddling the two there. So typist, sometimes is aligned more with the HTML, yeah, we're flexible side, and typist sometimes is leaning a little more towards the PDF, I'm gonna be finicky side of things. So we're gonna talk about layouts in terms of the body and the margin primarily. Sidebars we can take a look at those as well. But I want to see if we can control where we place things within our documents. In terms of definitions, this link, and again, these links on this week's slides, there's going to be some redundancy to them, but these are all references that helped me kind of conceptualize how I want to control things. And so the language here is important. So knowing that body is the main middle part, it sounds kind of silly, but it's really important. And that word you're going to see is actually something that becomes important. Body and margin are words that are important in terms of how we're specifying where we want content to actually be. You can see there's all kinds of web designers have gone over this for years, but there's all kinds of kind of little subtleties in terms of differences here. The body itself is between these two left-hand and right-hand margins. If you want to go a little bit outside the body, there's something called an outset. There's the page that is broader than the body itself. And the page is the entire visible screen. On HTML documents, one of the advantages of these is that these are scalable. So if I can drag, you know what I did? I was trying to drag, rookie mistake there. I was trying to drag the X, right? I shouldn't have done that. I should have dragged the lower part, not the upper part. But I can't find the upper part. What I wanted to show was that these HTML documents are responsive. So what the page is and what the body is actually changes. And as a matter of fact, and the reason that images are helpful when we're talking about layouts is because you can really kind of see that difference with the images themselves. These specifications that we're going to make in terms of body versus margin versus page, these are going to be relevant not just for images, they're going to be relevant for words, which is what we're going to focus on tonight. They're relevant for objects such as tables. Now hey, look at that, they used the kable. It's good to see kable again so recently after we just talked about it. There's an inset, what the heck? Okay, so inset's just a little broader than outset, but narrower than page. So again, these terms are important. That's why I called this bullet point. I referred to it as definitions. I was getting definitions and terms from this. What else do we have here? Screen inset. We talked about inset. There are capabilities that we can apply in fenced divs. There are also the same capabilities that we can apply within code chunks themselves. Margins, I wanted to make sure tonight we're going to talk about margins as well. Margins, I believe, in terms of margin content, that's something that primarily, some of this might not be supported in a PDF document type. And margins are one of the things that just might not be supported. So one of the things that make PDFs a little more rigid in terms of you can do that is PDFs are almost minimalist by design. That is the functionality that they have, they don't want to get crazy with it. HTML is more like the rambunctious teenager of these document types. It's like, I'll try that. Yeah, you want to do this? All right, I'll accept it. And so with HTML documents, we're going to see the capability of playing with these margins a little easier is my expectation. And with PDFs, if we struggle, PDFs, that's something that may just not be built into the system. It just may not be capable. So I'm considering this content to be all kind of the same. So there's different types of content that you can put in margins. Here they're putting a footnote. You can also put references, which is kind of neat. I could see a use for that. There's also asides, which are fun. So asides is just kind of like it's like a call out. We could put call outs in margins as well. and then you can have this kind of overflowing, everything we talked about with outset, inset, page, and what was the other one? Outset, inset, page, and body. All of those terms also apply to just one direction. So you can do it for the entire element, or you can do it directionally within these elements, and you see just here right and left specifications and what those control in terms of content. Okay, so there's a lot there. We're not going to get to all of it tonight, but let's try to get to some of it. And the other thing I wanted to, we're going to cover this for sure. So the thing I think we'll start with, boy, that was a really slowly kind of rising, kind of creepy, just, wasn't that creepy how slowly that came up? It was like a zombie or something. I don't know. Let's see if we can reload that. Oh, no, it's not going to come up again. One of the things that we need to cover tonight for sure is just columns and controlling columns within these different document types, because that's something that is supposed to be portable across different document types, but historically it hasn't been. And so what I did this week to prep us for tonight, what I actually did was I made sure to install the most recent version of Quarto. And so I have 1.8.26 installed, which is kind of a major change for me for the last 6 months or so. I've been using, I think, 1.4 maybe. So there are some updates that I actually missed. But because we're going to check out some of these column specifications, I wanted to and because historically these column specifications have not worked equally well across different product types, I wanted to make sure to have the most recent version of Quarto. So I have that. So let's go into R and let's play. Let's play. Now, I don't think I need a project folder. Every time I say I don't think I need a project folder, we regret it. So I'm probably going to regret it. But let's just do a Quarto document. Now, I don't know what I did to my RStudio here, but the last couple of times I've asked for a blank Quarto document, it's been blank. Like it hasn't, there's an option here to create empty, but this create should come somewhat populated. Of course, now it does. Maybe I did hit the create an empty document button. Maybe that's what happened. I'm going to override spot. I don't remember what spot is, so I'm not sure I really want to replace it, but we'll replace it. That's fine. And the reason we don't need a project folder is I think everything that we want should pop up in our preview panel in RStudio. And again, I know I say this a lot, but my recommendation is always to try to render the document without having much change to it, just to make sure that everything is loaded okay and works. And the column specification that I tend to use most frequently is called just .columns. And you have to have a closing fence on that as well. So let's just encompass everything here. So my closing fence is going to be at the bottom. So we're going to have everything here within columns. You can have as many columns as you want. Let's just do 2 of them to kind of show what's going on. So I have the specification within the columns fence itself is the way I've been structuring them, and I believe these are the values that are expected. I'm not sure, we could check this, but I'm not sure what else is intended to go into columns. Now there's other goop that we can apply here, but in terms of what's expected is what do I want my column width to be relative to the page itself. And so we'll do, just so we see a little difference here, we'll do 35, 65. Let's do that. And so I'm going to stop that column here after my running code. So the expectation is, in terms of my layout, this information right here should appear in a left-hand column spanning 35% of the page. And we'll put everything else then in the right-hand column. And again, we could have multiple, we could have 3 columns if we want, we could have 4 columns if we want. I do recommend, and this is where your scripts get a little unwieldy, I do recommend putting spaces between these fences. It sometimes is consequential. Unfortunately, it'd be great if it wasn't, but it sometimes is. So I'm going to do a second column width. And this isn't always needed. So this, as long as it's within the broader fence, this should give me information that's 65%. And it doesn't need to be 65% either. So this is going to be more important in terms of specifying it if you do want that full 100% spanned. And so let's go ahead and re-render this. And keep in mind that your preview panel isn't always going to be a good representation of what the document looks like. So there you actually see what we expected. If I wanted to move running code up on top of the other content, I can do that pretty easily. I'll just take these two, the closing fence and the opening fence, and I'll move them above running code. And now the first column will just be Quarto paragraph, and then everything else will be in the right-hand column. There we go. Very easy peasy. Again, if you don't specify this second one, it should look the same. Let's actually do something a little different first. So let's go ahead and make this narrower. So we'll also make this 35. So the expectation here is that it'll be 35 this column, and then this column is going to be narrower. It's not going to span the entire body. It's going to be compressed. So we can try that. And there you see kind of emptiness left on the right. So controlling layouts in HTML files is really easy. It's really straightforward. This is my preferred way to do it, is to use the .column specification. Now I'm going to take out the second column specification. So all I have here is, first of all, columns is spanning the entire content, so everything in here is going to be encompassed within it. It's going to be affected by this request. But I've only specified the column width for the first content, so my expectation is by default the rest of it should be in the remaining elements of the body. So this should be the same as doing 35-65. Oh, it's not. Okay, that's interesting. So that may be working a little differently in Quarto 1.8. It may have been it may have been a bug that I was kind of taking advantage of, but I was being lazy with some of my scripts, which you shouldn't do. So don't be like me. But instead of being lazy, you should actually specify the column width that you really want. And so if we do that, we see it looking like we want. I'm going to change this to, no, I'll leave it. Let's actually leave it, and let's see what happens when we ask for our typist and our PDF documents. And my expectation is, unfortunately, these aren't going to work. They're supposed to work, but I don't think they're going to work. Now, typist, maybe it'll work in typist. No, it's not working. So, and this is traditionally one of the differences. There's that Q. I love the typist Q. I love the typist Q. Traditionally, this is one of the differences between PDFs and HTML file types is you need a different way to specify columns. Now, I know within the typist documentation, and for that matter, the PDF documentation, there is a way to apply columns to the entire document, but that's not what we want. So if you want your layout to be consistent within your document, you can add that within this front matter here. You can add commands, and those are readily available on the Quarto help pages. You can find those. What I'm interested in is targeted elements. So even though we have everything here displayed, let's pretend that we have more content beyond this. Let's look for our lorem ipsum generator. Let's get a bunch of lorem ipsum in there. Well, there's a lot of these, aren't there? And I guess it could be everything, couldn't it? Or it could be anything. It doesn't need to be lorem ipsum. I think with Diego here one week, what we did was we actually used Moby Dick. That was a little more fun. I think we were looking at typist then when we were doing Moby Dick. So I'm going to put it back on the HTML bit in a second here just to show that there is a differentiation, and we're going to try to replicate that in typist and PDF formats. We won't be able to do it through this .column specification. Now the other thing I should do, just for better practice, I guess, it is possible. And see, this is the effect that I wanted. I wanted some isolated information that has a layout that's different. Okay, so let's actually go back to my slides. And I think I have a link. Kulas has too much open. Let me find my slides. You good people have a link to it. I don't have a direct link to it. What is today, the 18th? So there's a couple of things we can check, and one of the things one of the things I think we can check is this layout command. Now layout has, my understanding is this was intended for images. But I use it. I've used it to control the placement of words as well, not just images. And this does seem to be more portable. And so there are kind of two similar commands that we can actually use. One is layout and calls, and then the other is just layout. And there's a little bit of back and forth here in terms of the difference between those two. There is a technical difference between those two. Again, my understanding is layout itself is something that's more commonly used with images, but we can use it with words as well. And then layout and call is something that is it's a little closer in structure to the column specification that we actually have. Now we can also try grid, and maybe let's try grid first, because I haven't tried grid actually. We should be able to change. Let's do this. I don't use grid, so this wasn't something that I expected to see as we're looking through the file that I chose to link. G call. Now the numbers obviously are going to be consequential, so we'll have to look up what those numbers actually refer to. But I'm just switching .column and .column width commands. And the better thing to do here instead of me typing would be to copy, so we're not messing anything up. Let's take a look and see what the .6 is referring to. I think I have seen these before where the anticipation is that those are going to add to 12. No, they have 10 here. Okay. So there is a number that these are adding to. Okay, so there's different values with different kind of resulting layouts. G call 6 is going to have a little gap, and that's fine. I think we'll go ahead and do that. Let's see if these work. So we're going to see if they work in HTML. They should, because the example is HTML. So my anticipation here is these are going to change from 35 and 65 to half and half with a little gap in the middle. Now there's a gap here as well, but that gap is primarily due to learn kind of wrapping on the next line. If I had the letter A there instead, it would probably be closer. I know that's not grammatically. Oh shoot, I already changed the grid, didn't I? I changed the grid. There it is. I mean, that works great. The question is grid gonna work in PDF or typist? Now, my guess is it's more likely to work in a typist PDF, typist specified PDF, than it is in PDF. And I know grid is actually so it didn't work in typist. And I know grid is actually a word that is a technical word within HTML contexts as well. It's a layout specification that is meaningful in HTML contexts. Okay, so grid did not work in either PDF or typist. It's good to know, but we weren't really crossing our fingers too much on that anyway. So what I was hoping to take a look at was endcall. Here we go, layout endcall. So endcall equals 2. Yeah, and you can get kind of complex with this. So we haven't tried layout yet. Layout lets you get really specific in terms of where things are placed. My understanding is I believe it does use underlying it kind of some of those grid specifications. Now layout endcall is going to be a little, you have to be careful with this because the spacings are going to have consequence here. So the spacings is what's determining what goes in one column and a second column. And so you can see it kind of hops, it bullfrogs or frog hops each other. So it takes this information, puts it in the first column, takes this, so you can think odd and even. Every odd row with a space between it goes in the first column. Every even row goes in the second. Now this is not a wonderful way to structure information because you got to really think about it, but we'll try it. So we shouldn't have to do our content specifications here anymore. We just need one big endcall specification. And again, these, and we'll leave our lorem ipsum. So same content before the lorem ipsum. My expectation is we're going to get it in 2 columns. There's no dot on this one. You got to be careful about those dots. And if I could find my equal sign, we could try it. I don't know if you can hear my music tonight, but it's very, it sounds, I don't know, arabesque maybe? So it did it, but it took 1 plus 1. It took our code chunk and it put it outside of there. So we would probably have to specify where that goes within the column layout, within the code chunk itself. And we can come back to that if we have enough time. I keep running over on time. These aren't supposed to be 2-hour sessions. They're supposed to be an hour session. So typist is an exact replication of the HTML. And by the way, as you're testing these different capabilities, my recommendation is to see if you're testing out something new that you're not exactly sure how it works. I do recommend trying it in HTML first and then see if you can get it to repeat within these different formats. It did actually fully represent our HTML document within a PDF as specified through typist. That's awesome. I'm not sure. PDF with layout endcall. I don't know that I've ever tried this. And again, there's an intermediary process with the PDF specification. It's going to generate a text file, and that text file is what this is compiled from. Okay, it did. You can see there's no gutter. So there's no gutter on the PDF file. So the gutter is the space between these two columns. So we might, let's see if we can do 3. Now, one of the things about PDF and just the more we use typists, the more I'm impressed with just the internal logic and how things look. I got this going on my screen here. I don't know how the calculator came up. I have a calculator. I don't need you, old school calculator. I can ask what's 2 plus 2. Look at R says 2 plus 2 is 4. There's a 3 columns, and I wanted to do that to see if the PDF looks any different if we increase the number of columns. The gutters here are fantastic. They look great. Let me do the HTML. Let me do HTML one more time just so we can see what these look like. And again, there's no monkey business here that I'm doing. It's just these are the default specifications without us doing any sort of fiddling. And by fiddling, I mean we can change the size of those gutters. We can control the placement of those columns more specifically. We would if we were, if this were a product that we were trying to market or sell to like some consumer base or some customer, some client. What's going on here? So I wanted to compare these two, and I'm looking primarily at the gutter. The gutter looks similar. Now, one of the things you're going to notice across these different document types is the PDFs. By tradition, the PDFs have a lot more of these, what are they called? These continuations. There's actually a name for it, but these dealy bobbers. And it's not called a dealy bobber, but I'm calling it a dealy bobber. When it's cutting off the word and hyphenating it, that's a lot more common in PDF applications than it is in HTML. And so this is the PDF, and it's generated via typist, but this is the PDF, and here is the HTML file. So I'm looking primarily at the gutters. So I got off on the typist specification because of the continuation with the hyphenated word, but initially I was looking at the gutters. The other thing you're seeing here is this right justification by default on the PDF files. So everything's aligned well on the right. That's not happening with the HTML files. And one of the reasons that's not something that HTML worries about is because on HTML files, again, you can have this kind of changing screen size. And, if you do that with a PDF, the content's not going to be reflective. The content isn't reactive. The content is stable. Okay. So layout end call is working great. That's actually fantastic. It's a fantastic way to specify how your content is displayed that's portable across HTML, typist, and PDF. Now that's fantastic. Now next week when I do my overview, again, what you're seeing here by default is you're seeing no gutter. It's not as messy with 3 columns, but definitely there still is absolutely no space between the gutters, and we should be able to change that. We should be able to change that within the YAML specification for our PDF. But let's try one more, since we're kind of running up against the clock here and nobody has any questions. Let's try one other thing, which is this more complex layout specification. And so this more complex layout specification, one of the things that I've done in the past is, and I'm not sure if this is still supported or not, but you used to be able to have a little more control over what is actually being displayed in terms of the content itself. And so I'm curious to try that. So let's try layout. So layout, I believe, if we can find, where's this week's slides? Again, I got so many tabs open. We didn't get the margins. I feel bad about that. Again, if anyone has any questions about this stuff and want to see me go over something, drop me a note, because otherwise it's just me kind of sitting here doing what I think is fun or neat. This is the layout I was kind of thinking about. Now it follows this row column convention, and again it's intended for images, but we should be able to apply it to non-images as well. I don't have any belief that this is actually going to work right here, but we're going to try it, because I didn't really look at it. Yeah, the PDF does not like that. Let's see if the HTML file does anything with that. Oh, I'm definitely missing a quote, aren't I? If there's a start quote, there should be an end quote. So what's happening here? Where did I take that from? Oh, user error. That was Kulas. So I didn't copy enough there. But again, I didn't really look at it carefully. I'm not really anticipating that that's going to work. It did. Huh, look at that. So it gave me left-hand information, gave me right-hand information, and then it gave me spanning information. I'm sorry, this is the spanning information down here. Let's include some lorem ipsum so we have more content. Whoa. And then we'll go back to PDF and Typist and see if that actually works. Now, one thing we haven't done is have a lot of control over. We're controlling what things look like, but we're not controlling well where it actually, what goes into what column element. And so what I did there was I changed it from the from the row column specification to just no column specified, but only rows, and it renders a little differently than what you expect, because what you're seeing are columns, but what you're seeing are columns, but you're seeing columns that are identified via the row comma column convention. I know it's a little confusing. But in terms of the internal logic, in terms of how it's taking that, again, it's using spaces as kind of its differentiator. So if we were to put some spaces in here, you're going to see different distribution of content. And then again, you'd probably drive yourself crazy trying to structure a document like this, such that you can control the content. But you can see when you introduce those spaces that we're actually getting a more equal distribution of content across those columns. Okay, so let's see if layout works with those different documents. I don't believe we've tried this yet, and I've really messed up my document. It's just got a ton of crap in it. Wow, look at that. Typist, you're working now. Why, Typist, why are you giving me this on the bottom where I only have 2? So this little bit I'm unsure about, so I'm not sure where that's coming from, unless we have some straggling end fences. I don't see a straggling end fence. So that's curious that it went from 3 to 2. Let's see if we can force it to just 2. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so this makes a little more sense. So there's a little bit that it looks like the page specification. So it's not something that is, now that's really interesting. So it's not something that is operative across pages. So there's something about the page break that's interfering with our layout specification. That's definitely not something that I anticipated, but it's very interesting. So 1, 1, we can make 4. We should be able to make 4 columns on here. Yeah. Okay. It did. So it's not the page break. So it did. It does have some internal logic where it's breaking a little bit at the bottom. So it's breaking a little bit where we didn't want it to. And I don't know if that's just because I have too much content there. That is interesting. It's not breaking with 2 columns, but it seems to be breaking with 3 and 4. And so this, again, this might be something that the layout specification might have some limited capability in terms of number of columns. I did do a little reading about that. So some of these specifications that we're trying across these different formats are going to work for 2 columns, but not for more than 2 columns. And that could be what's going on with Typist. Now the other thing that we can try is we can try, again, we'd have to play with the gutters, but that's awesome. That is awesome in terms of portability for specifying columns across Typist, PDF, and HTML. So next week when I do my recap, probably going to make a little table in terms of what works well across these different output types. And then with a caveat in terms of we'd have to play with the gutter. Play with the gutter on the PDF document type itself, because we definitely would want a little more space there. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about is with layout, I think it's layout, we should be able to kind of control what goes in the first and the second with kind of empty fences. So first and second shouldn't render, but I'm curious if they actually isolate content for us, because that's what we want. We want to have a little more control over what goes in column 1 and column 2 than just using these spaces. So PDF didn't like that. It put everything in column 1. Oh, you know what it did? It saw this as the ending fence. So that's not going to work. It is not going to work. These nested fences, they get really messy. And so I don't think this is going to work either. Yeah, we're getting the same thing. Let me just do one quick check here and see if I have any example that I can pull from that might actually help us out. Now I'm seeing a different specification of this. So I'm seeing if we call this first column, this can't work. If we call this second column, I don't think this is going to work. But let's try it again because it's more forgiving. Let's try it with an HTML first. And again, as we're kind of getting to the end here, keep in mind, or remember that you're going to see 2 of these. You're going to see 2 of these weekly sessions. And that's kind of this week and last week. It's a function of the software that I use for these, and that's not going to happen again. I don't think. So the other thing we could try is we could try a little different specification of layout. And I've used this specification before, this kind of percent specification. Yeah, it's still not liking that. It doesn't like first column, second column. Okay, so that's something that maybe I'll do a little work on in the interceding week and see if I can get that to actually be operative, because I know I have got, and the layout's not the typical way to control this, because layout does have some quirks to it. And again, my understanding is layout is intended more for images, figures, than it is for text-based content. So me putting those fences in with first column and second column, it kind of messed things up a little bit. Looks to me like it was trying to close the fence. So no matter what I put onto the fence, it was trying to close it, and that's not what I wanted to actually happen. So, okay. So that's kind of some rudimentary layout information. Again, we didn't get too far in depth with it. We can get a lot more elaborate, a lot more sophisticated with the layout of your documents. We can put stuff in margins. We can play with the margin width. We can actually, again, it gets really kind of elaborate when you get into image specifications. And whether you want to be very specific about controlling where images are, or if you want to allow a little more flexibility in terms of browser and interactivity. So maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll have to think of so we don't have I again, but maybe when we get to P, we'll do pictures, and we'll talk about placement of pictures within these documents. Okay, so there's layouts. Again, be on the lookout for the larger session, the horizontally displayed session if you're watching this on a phone, or if you're looking at me and you're just seeing a little tiny image. There is a better version available on YouTube right now, and next week there won't be, because hopefully I'll figure out how to shut that off. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your week.